Welcome to the Goat's Gravy, the ultimate podcast tailored for young professionals navigating the dynamic world of sales and sales leadership. We are here to serve up a blend of mentorship and advice. In each episode, we dive deep into conversations with accomplished leaders and rising stars in the sales industry. Together, we explore their triumphs, challenges, and invaluable experiences. Our goal? To distill their insights into practical lessons that can seamlessly integrate into your own career journey. So whether you're a seasoned sales expert or just starting out, join us as we ladle out wisdom and inspiration, empowering you to excel in the ever-evolving landscape of sales. Onward we go. Welcome back for another episode of the Goat's Gravy. Our guest today exemplifies what great looks like as a consistent top performer. With how he plans, how he manages, how he executes his business, someone who has persevered through personal and professional adversities and is on top of his game. From the heartland of Illinois, known as Rockford, now living in Naperville, we are happy to welcome Robbie Corirossi.
Robbie.
Thank you.
Whoa.
Robbie's sales journey has been a spectacular one. Best described as gritty, yet driven by passion to succeed with any goal set forth, but also doing the right activities to win the long game. His 25-year selling career includes many accolades from breaking sales records everywhere he's been, as well as being recognized as the District Sales Manager of the Year, not once, Scott.
Not twice.
No, twice. While working for ADP, which is very impressive. He continued his selling excellence with Courier Printing as the top seller, and over the past 5 years working for Sentinel Technologies, he has won not one,
but two.
Nope.
Three?
Keep going.
Get out of here. Four
President's Club.
Incredible.
4 President's Club's trips in a row.
Stud.
And he retired last year's quota in August. The year before, he retired quota in March. I think they got a quota setting issue. And this year, he's already ahead of his plan for 2024. So very impressive, Robbie. But there's much more to Robbie than being a phenomenal seller. When he's not strategizing and closing deals, you'll find him relishing quality moments with his new wife, Veronica, and his stepdaughter, Alice. He also enjoys following in his father's footsteps with a love for cooking. His specialty is hibachi on the Blackstone.
Loves it.
Loves it. Robbie is deeply rooted in his community and faith, actively contributing to his church, where he leads a small group and several other initiatives at the church that have community impact. Today, we have the privilege of unraveling the layers of Robbie's story, the wins, the challenges, and the flavorful antidotes that define his successful career path. Join us now to learn from his experience and insights that have helped shape his successful career. Robbie, welcome to the studio, a.k.a. my basement.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me here.
What's up, Robbie?
How we doing?
Doing great.
He goes by Rob Bass, Billy.
Rob Bass.
Yeah.
Rob Bass.
That's an 80s term. It's public. It's been public for a while. He's earned it.
Okay.
He's earned the nickname. So, Robbie, we
abilities?
I do not, but I do like the rapper.
Yeah.
Nice. Thank you for asking.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of my favorites.
Yeah.
So, Bass, welcome into the studio. I love chatting about sales with you because I think you're really passionate about sales. And I think you're a great mentor. So you're actually a really, really solid guest. We're so happy you're here. And we wanted to start off, like, you've got a real passion around handling objections in your personal life, professional life. I've seen you do it. You know, we've known each other a long time. You know, talk to us about your favorite objection that you had to handle and how did you handle it?
Okay, that's a great question. So I'm going to bring you back all the way back to my very first career profession with ADP.
Yep.
For those of you who do not know what ADP is, it's a payroll company. So I'm brand new. I'm calling this gentleman from Texas. I pick up the phone and I tell him this is Robbie from ADP. He goes, ADP? What's ADP? I'm like, well, sir, we help you with payroll taxes, insulate you from the IRS, kind of like a business bodyguard. He goes, let me get this straight. You want me to pay you to pay me? You gotta be shitting me. Click.
And so that was it.
That was it. It was the first objection I heard. And I was like, I can't overcome that because he's accurate.
He's right.
But what I realized is in that moment, I'm like, okay, I need to get ahead of objections before I hear them.
Right.
So I started creating my own type of way of approaching objections. What do I mean by that? I do what's called disarming the objection. Would you like me to elaborate on that?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's do it.
So what are some of the common objections most salespeople hear? I'm happy. I don't have time. I'm in a contract. I'm not interested. Those are things you're going to hear no matter what. This is just for brute, hard force call calling, prospecting, people who don't know you. So what I would do is I would call people and I would give them the objection before they could give it to me. So it throws them off.
Yeah.
So what do I mean?
Give an example. Yeah.
I have a perfect example for you. I'll call people up, be like, this is Robbie from Sentinel. I'm guessing you're happy. Otherwise, hopefully you'd be calling me. However, I'm just curious, when you guys go out for bids, are you required to get 3 different quotes? So I'm not really selling them anything. I'm getting them to pay attention, and I'm trying to pull a latent need to the front of mind. They could say I'm happy with my current provider, and they still do have to get 3 quotes. So both can be equally true. But if I allow them to say I'm happy first without me acknowledging something like, hey, you're probably happy, otherwise you'd be calling me.
Yeah.
Or that's just an example of pulling getting ahead of the objection before they give it.
Yeah.
So Billy, Robbie's a unique case in that he's a little bit of a scientist, and I don't know how many sales folks that you've run across that actually list out all the objections they're going to hear it, rehearse it, and are as passionate about nailing the objection and incorporating that into the sales call. Like that to me is going over and beyond. I don't know what you're seeing,
Absolutely.
but he's a little bit of a mad scientist.
Yeah. Well, I think you'll see that more consistently with your top performers in general. I think they practice their craft as we all should. But I love that you did that. So was that one of your first sales calls for them when that happened? And did they train you prior to that, or you just weren't ready to handle that first one? He hung up on you, and that's when you got motivated. Like I got to figure this out quick.
So sometimes people will wait for the objection and then they'll try to give a rebuttal to it. To me, that's just invalidating what the people's saying what you mean. I'm going to tell you something that's better. So what I try to do is I try to empathize with the objection. You know what I mean? But instead of just empathizing with it, I try to give it to them like, hey, this is Robbie from Sentinel. Hey, man, I get it. You probably don't want to take my phone call. I'm in sales. I want to dodge salespeople too. However, I just want to know when you guys
just disarming them.
Yes.
Right,
yeah. When your contract is up for renewal, do you have to do vendor evaluations? I'm drawing a connection by acknowledging something that most likely is true. They don't want to take my phone call, but they did.
Yeah.
And if they are open to, vendor evaluations, then guess what? Your name just got thrown in the hat. You're not trying to push anything. We do this. We do ABC, XYZ, what every other sales rep is doing. You're trying to draw a connection. You're trying to relate with them. And in a way, you're trying to make it funny for them because like, hey, dude, I know you don't want to take this phone call. I dodge sales reps too, and I have to do this.
Right.
And so now you're creating connections, and then you're getting into a conversation.
Yeah.
You end with a question instead of a period, and then that invites them to give you information instead of an objection.
And have you carried this through every role you've had since that first experience where you learn all the objections, you pull people together, get everyone to put them out there on the table, and then you practice responding to those, or walk us through how you've carried that forward?
It started with ADP. So after my 3rd year in ADP, I became a sales training manager. And that's when I started developing these techniques of like getting ahead of these objections. Because you hear when you do so much prospecting at ADP, you sell it once and you move on. So I'm bringing on 110 new logos a year. So you have to constantly prospect. You're a hunter. Even at Courier Printing, same thing. And then when I came into Sentinel Technologies, I came in 0 accounts. It took me 9 months to get my first account. So you have to go at it. And if you're just going at it, just picking up the phone saying, hey, this is Robbie from Sentinel, we do XYZ, ABC, big freaking deal. Everybody's doing that. If you're sending an email, everybody's doing that. But what they're not doing is they're trying to draw a connection by asking a question instead of offering a solution.
Yep.
And it's called prospecting into their buying process instead of prospecting into their purchasing, like what they purchase. So I try to identify, hey, when you have to, do you have to do annual pen tests? Do you have to alternate vendors? Do you have to get multiple quotes? Do you do evaluations? Instead of saying, we do this, do you need any of that?
So you're unpacking the customer journey and then getting yourself aligned to how they acquire, or purchase versus just running through your sales process.
Exactly. Yeah. Making it about
Clever.
them.
Yeah, really good.
So as far as, our audience, a lot of young sellers out there, a lot of younger leaders out there early in career, you got a chance to work at ADP. Mm-hmm. And I see a lot of ADP background, a lot of Paychex background. I personally was at UPS cold calling buildings, high rises. I think we all got to cut our teeth there, but what advice do you give our audience when it comes to that hardcore sales job, the first one that you're going to get? Is it important would you recommend going to an ADP-like organization, or is it like a CDW? Any ideas that you've got for our listeners on what should that first job look like?
I am so lucky that I worked for ADP because they gave me the tools and they gave me the flexibility to really learn, but they also taught me how to persevere and how to be persistent and how to really knock down doors. And I think it's so difficult with people to understand. You almost look like a sales profession, like a high school or college. Your first year is your freshman year. It is all learning. And it's okay when you get these little wins, because those are building blocks into the big wins. And those are learning, like you are walking through the process of what sales is. And if you can work with a company that gives you that ability, that's training, those skills, that equips you to really become a heavy hit prospector, you are going to accelerate no matter where you go, because it doesn't matter what product you say, you're going to learn how to really relate with people.
Is it safe to say, just a quick follow-up on that you may not want to go with the highest offer coming out of college, or maybe early in career, you got to be careful of the big OTE that people put out in front of you versus what you're saying, which is give me the right people to surround myself with to get those building blocks nailed?
My answer would be go for the experience. Play the long game, because somebody can offer you something that looks good from far, but it's far from good. You may get this OTE that's whatever, 300, 400K, but is it sustainable? Do you have the skills? Are you equipped enough to be able to perform at that 400K level? Have you done the pre-call planning, the prep work, to be able to be a 400K performer right out of college?
Sure.
I mean,
well, just one comment on OTE on target earnings. I think it's interesting, right? Because there's some companies will kind of promote the fact that they've got say they have a 300 plan, but you have to do your homework, right? How many people in the sales force actually achieve that quota? How realistic is that? What are you walking into? Are you going into an expansion, brand new territory, or are you taking over a territory that maybe just lost a really big contract and you got to start over with rebuilding? So there's so much information you got to gather in the front end. But I agree with Robbie. I think it's interesting when people have opportunities. I've seen people that have accelerated their careers by going to multiple startups, and they had to be very resourceful and figure things out for themselves. I actually lean a little bit toward, if you can go get an experience with a large company, a large tech company like an ADP or Salesforce, or those type of companies, they're a great training ground. You get a lot of exposure. You're in a network with a lot of people, usually your age, and so you can really learn from them. But ultimately, you have to own your own development, and that's what I love about your story. From day one, that first phone call didn't go so well, but you had something in you that motivated you to go fight and figure it out. Where does that come from? Maybe talk about, let's go back to the early days. How did you even decide to get in sales? Who's influenced you along the way, that you have kind of those innate abilities to pull out?
That's interesting. So ever since age 16, I was in sales. I was in retail sales. And then even after that, I was a bartender. I worked in the restaurant industry, which they work together because sales is professional hospitality. The more hospitable you can be with people, the better you are at relationships, the better you are at asking questions, engaging, and connecting with people. That is going to be bottom line. That's going to help you succeed. That's going to help you build these relationships, because sales is relationship building. Sales is about hospitality. Sales is taking care of your clients. And then guess what? I believe in karma. You're good to these people, they're going to take care of you. But it's what you put first. You put them first, you take care of them, and then it's going to come back to you. Mm-hmm. So to answer your question, sales has been in my blood since I was even in second grade, selling pizzas door to door. But once again, you have that kid who has their parents who could sell their pizzas for you, where I was out on the streets going door to door to door to door to door to door, learning.
Yeah.
Because the person who gets it handed to you, they may have a bigger sales number, but they didn't learn the lesson.
Yeah.
And so it almost goes back to the question you had before, who's got the better farm system? I would go to the company that has the best farm system because you're going to get the better contract, but from what you learn and what you developed. I developed young, and then I brought that into my career early on in my career and even later on in my career.
Is it true that you take a slice out and then give them the pizza?
Half a slice.
Half a slice.
Like, here's the cut. Here's my commission. Here's my
because you didn't tip. Here's my cut.
Here's my commission. That one's missing a few pepperonis. Sorry there.
So when I met you, Robbie, you've always been, this is kind of back to the beginning part of the conversation. You've always been someone that's going to put the work in. You know, you knew I was in sales, just in let's practice and let's dig in. And where does that, and I think this is kind of where Billy's question's coming from, is like, we've got some members of our audience that they're trying to figure out if sales is for them. Or they might be in sales and they're trying to say, man, I can't get to my number and I got to get to that level, that top 5%, that top 10%, those 4 club, trips that you've gotten in a row. Where does that come from to get that desire and that grit to actually practice that much about sales?
Yeah. So one of the techniques that I use was called the FILO, first in, last out, right? First in the office, last out of the office. Or if you're not working from an office, it doesn't even have to be an office. We work remotely, right? Just put in the hours. Put in the hours. Be a grinder. And I know some people don't want to be grinders up front, but when you do grind, it pays off.
Yep.
And it does more than pay off. It teaches you. It gives you that valuable lesson, those valuable lessons. So am I answering the question you're looking for?
You are. I'm just trying to figure out if they're not grinding, and are they at a point where they can kind of coast and maybe find a new profession? Like we're talking to people that might be in college or right outside of college, and they're trying to figure out if sales is for them.
Sure.
Can they look in the mirror and say, man, I've grinded in sports, I'll be okay? Or are there any tips and tricks that maybe they shouldn't be in sales?
I'd say a couple things that are identifiers and qualifiers is, do you like to be competitive? Do you like that big win? Do you like that rush of closing a big deal? But do you also like to put the prep time in front of it?
Sure.
Because, there's got to be the yin and yang, the balance. You have to put this in to get this out. But it's big effort, big reward. Or do you just like to stay at an even 7? Do you like 1s and 10s, or do you want to be at an even 7? Because sometimes in sales, you got to be able to reach for those 10s. You got to have to get those highs, and you're going to get those lows too. Yeah, it's going to come with 1s and 10s because it's never a straight line in sales.
Never.
It's not linear. I do think what you're saying is a really important message, because I think there's so many people, Scott, to think where you're going that maybe whether you start having self-doubt, if you're not getting business fast enough, if you're new to the game, you're trying to figure it out. That's why we always try, for me, it's always been focus on what are the meaningful or vital activities that are going to move the needle. And if the activities are there, over time, the business is going to come. If you're doing the right things consistently and you're sticking with it, you're going to be successful, right? And I think so many people give up too early, or they start talking themselves out of the role they're in. Either it's not a good fit for them, whether it's culture or the people, or it's not a realistic plan to go after. But ultimately, you always got to look inward and say, am I doing everything I can? Am I controlling my attitude? Am I controlling my effort? Because that's half the battle, right? Just showing up every day and believing in yourself, that is half the battle. Once you have that belief in the skills you bring to the table and you commit to doing the right things, and if you don't know what those things are, that's when mentorship becomes really important. You got to go find that. So maybe transition for a minute. Talk a little bit about who's been the one to influence you along the way, whether it's an early mentor or someone in your life that has been a go-to for you to help you through these challenges early in the career.
Sure. There's been a lot of mentors throughout my life. My father's been one, just watching him run a business, start from scratch, didn't have a college education, just seeing how he's done it from ground up. He didn't actually tell me anything specific about sales, but observing and watching him persevere and go and put 3 children through college. That was one of his biggest successes. And I mean, he was a silent mentor. Scott has been a mentor. He's been an active mentor. Scott got me connected to Sentinel Technologies ever since I was younger. Even before at ADP, we would share ideas on prospecting. I remember you telling me a time when you interviewed and you did a delivery for a job and said you brought him a pizza and said, I will deliver for you.
Yeah.
but you're thinking out of the box.
I think I didn't get that job, by the way.
That's all right.
It's all right. I tried. It's out of the box.
It's a
out
great
of the pizza
story.
box.
What were you wearing?
Actually, can I tell a quick one?
Yeah, you could tell it.
So I told my brother, I gave him some advice on, this is back to your mentoring point, Billy. So we're not going too far off track here.
Sorry.
And I told my brother he was trying to get into sales, and he's now a police officer in Western Mass. And I said, Dan, send them a thank you for the interview. And it happened to be, I think it was like a bottle of wine or something. It got sent back to him from HR, and they're like, we will not be bribed. We don't appreciate these tactics. So I called him right after the interview. I said, how'd it go? You probably nailed it, right? The follow-up was good. He goes, dude, you disqualified me from the opportunity. I was like, ooh. So, yeah, back to your mentoring. But any other mentors that were influential?
Even, you know what? Even my current manager, Joe Marty, he's been a good mentor for me because he's allowed me to develop. I think sometimes mentorship can also be giving somebody the space. I sucked my first year. I shouldn't have been with Sentinel, and he was the first one to tell me I shouldn't have been. But I got one big deal that turned the corner, and the next thing you know, I became a President's Club qualifier.
So that's actually what I was just talking about a few minutes ago, and that is the point, right? That is the perfect example. You joined a new company, you leverage your network, you got the opportunity. It took you 9 months to close your first deal.
First deal.
And I'm sure during that first 9 months, you probably had doubt seeping in the brain. You're questioning everything you're doing. You stayed with it. But look on the other side of climbing up that hill, 4 years in a row of club awards. That's huge, right? So talk about how you fought through that adversity for those 9 months, and what did you do to ultimately get that first deal closed?
Well, luckily I had a couple, experiences knowing that it takes a while in sales to build a pipeline. So patience, which is one of the hardest things innately for a sales rep, we're not real good at patience, but it's really required because sticking to things is so important, because it may take a while for those pendulums to start firing, but once they start firing, they tend to start firing on all cylinders.
Yeah.
I like to draw the analogy of baseball to sales. Baseball, you fail 7 out of 10 times at bat, you're a 300 hitter. You're a Hall of Famer. But you got to take those 7 fails to get those 3 wins to be a top producer. Very similar in sales, but you got to keep doing it. That's the perseverance. And even if you do take 3 wins out of 7 fails, 3 wins out of 10, you're going to get there, right? So what did I do to continue? I would do drop-offs just so I can humanize the sales process, because everyone's calling, everyone's emailing. When I would leave something behind for them and then call down on it, it was a little bit more, people were a little bit more receptive. Could I rewind a little bit on one of my most infamous drops that I've ever done? And it was just, there was this one company, it was back when I was at ADP. There's this one company I really wanted to get into, but I couldn't. So I would go each week for 4 weeks. I went there, and the guy's name was Bob. And in an envelope, the very first week I went in there, I put in the ace of clubs. I didn't leave my business card, okay? And I gave it to the secretary, and I would talk to the secretary. I would learn information about the business. Who are they using for payroll? Just kind of like eyes underneath the hood. So I gave him the ace of clubs. I said, hand this to Bob. Next week, I brought in an envelope, had the ace of diamonds. Hand this to Bob. So now I'm finding out where Bob's parking spot is, so I'll know if he's there or not, right? So I'm like literally doing recon. And then I did the ace of hearts. And the last time I went there to make sure I knew Bob was here. And I gave him the ace of spades. I said, tell Bob the ace of spades is here. He came out because of curiosity.
Right. Or he was afraid for his life. He peered around. Billy's like this.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
It's thinking outside the box on how to get somebody's attention.
Yeah, because Billy, when Robbie took the Sentinel job over, I remember talking to you about it, and I talked to a couple people over there. They said he can come over, but he's going to have to build literally his whole patch by himself, like 100% hunting, like not 99, 100.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things you're doing to humanize the process. I love that.
Creative.
What else did you do, over that 9 months to build the pipeline that's needed for you to kind of go to 4 clubs in a row. Like what else can you share? Because I love that ace of spades, even though you're scaring me with it. But what else, other techniques? Because you're a prospector.
Yep.
You're really good at it.
So
what else?
So the other drops that I would do at Sentinel Technologies, this is very cheesy, literally, but once again, I'm just trying to get their attention. I would get popcorn and gum because in technology, you do network refreshes. And so I would leave that for them with their business card, and I would call down on it and say, hey, I popped by and I wanted to know if you'd interview us for when your network is due for a refresh. I know this is cheesy, but it got their attention.
Right.
Popped by, network refresh. You got popcorn and gum. Now it's an association thing. Like even if it goes in their garbage,
yeah.
You know what I mean? It still went through their hands or went through their secretary's hands, and you are different than anybody else that's just picking up the phone, that's just sending an email. And sometimes it's just a matter of thinking outside the box to get into that person.
Yeah.
Now, I wouldn't do this just for anybody. I tried to pre-qualify these people to make sure that these are people I wanted to talk to.
Right.
And so I literally, my second largest account to this day was done from a pop drop. My first 6 accounts that I got at Sentinel was because of the pop drop. Not because I gave them popcorn and gum, but it's because I got their attention to respond to me from that.
Yeah.
Billy, let me ask you a question. You're a college fan, right? You're a college. You're a fan of a very specific.
Yep.
How would someone get your attention? What's the best way to do it?
People have done it. I've gotten messages on LinkedIn about an upcoming Ohio State football game, or
did it work?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've had people reach out, my fellow Buckeye or whatever, and it catches your attention. Sometimes it's little things, and there's been some sometimes more creative. To your point, someone showed up and had dropped some things off. It was actually someone trying to get a job, and they basically showed up at a team meeting we were doing, and they talked to another leader they were interviewing, and they showed up and they wanted to come, meet the team and see if they could just get some sit down, talk to everybody for a couple minutes. But they actually showed up. We were doing a team meeting. And then when we left the meeting, there was a handwritten note for every person they had talked to in that moment. So those things are always stand out. I love that.
Yeah.
Hey, real quick though, going back to there's 2 things that stand out. So 9 months, no sale, building pipeline, 4 years in a row of hitting. So maybe just a little bit of insight around the pipeline that you build. Are you trying to have 3x what you need to close? And then I want to transition to talk a little bit about how you impact your peer group.
Okay. So building pipeline, we had 50 named accounts. That means 50 accounts that were protected to us. I would call on 500 to 800 people constantly. So even though they weren't my accounts, I was still constantly.
What's that look like every day?
Perfect. I'm glad you asked. So in 1 week, I would hit each company 3 times. Call, email, hit them up on LinkedIn.
Do you have software that does this for you? You're doing it all yourself?
Unfortunately, it was doing it manually.
Yeah.
So.
And a lot of us are still manual. I work for a big company, so it's not a slight on Sentinel. A lot of this stuff's brute force today.
Yeah. I would create tasks, and then each day I would come in, my task list would already be, so it's not like I'm like, who am I going to call today? So I would have this task, and then when it would go to, voicemail, the minute it would go to voicemail, I'm shooting them an email. I'm looking at them on LinkedIn, so if they have Sales Navigator, they could see who looks at them. I'm calling them, so even if they dodge my calls, I'm on their caller ID, and then I'm hitting them with an email. So it's, I hit them 3 ways. One outbound activity is, gets 3 attempts. And I would do that Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or whatever the rotation was, Tuesday or Thursday. Mostly it was Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So I have accounts today, 1 new account. It took me 2 years to get the account. 2 years. Another one this year that finally came. It took me 4 years. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't hit them. I would keep the campaign alive for a month or 2, and then I would hit them once a month. Then I would hit them once every other month. So I would still stay in front of them, because guess what happens? Things change. People change. Decision makers change. Buyers change.
100%.
Companies get bought
100%.
out. So many times people are stuck on like, I got to know today. I know today is a yes tomorrow. You got red light, green light, and yellow light, right? Red light, no. A no today is a yes tomorrow. And so if you stay in front of these people in some way or form, if they're qualified, that yes is going to come. And you've already laid some groundwork, whether it's just recon, understanding who they're using, why they're using it, what they're buying, who's the CFO, who's the CIO, who are the players, who's your champion, who do you know that you went to college with that works at this company that could get you in. It's networking too, instead of just brute force attacks. It's who do you know that can get you a conversation or get you to lunch with somebody that could get you in front of this person that is happy, which most people are happy, but guess what? In technology, you could be happy today and upset the next day because we are in an industry that stuff is made to break.
Right.
So nothing is constant. It is fluid. So you could call this person, think of it like prospecting somebody with dementia. They may be happy today, but the next day.
But I think that's such an important point to emphasize is that I remember early on in my selling career, and I was selling robotics, I had someone telling me not to waste my time on a certain market. There's a few hospitals there that they're never going to buy. There's no money in the market and all that. But yet from the stage, kind of top down, our leaders would talk about, targeting these open markets where these open surgical procedures are happening, and you're finding those markets. Those are our opportunity to go, create real change and driving this minimally invasive approach with robotics. And I kept getting redirected, like stop focusing on the market they're never going to buy. But to your point, leaders change. And in my situation, I stayed with it. I kept making deposits over time. Sure enough, a CEO left. Another CEO came in from another market that had invested in this technology. Boom, right away, I was able to get 2 deals done within 12 months in that market. So I think it's so important to never give up on a prospect, even if they tell you they're not interested. The players do change, right? All the time.
One of my funniest other objection handles, once again, came from ADP. And one of the biggest objections we would hear is my wife does my payroll. And one time I responded, I was like, well, you know what? Divorce rate is 64%. Maybe that your payroll is your highest number on your P&L. We should talk tomorrow. Yeah. He laughed.
That's great.
It is pretty funny. But it's true.
It is. It's 64% chance your wife's.
And I think just the energy, Robbie, around prospecting, like just for our audience out there, like you've got really good energy. You can sense it in this podcast. Billy's got great energy. And I'll tell you a quick Billy story. You just got to own whatever room you're in, right? And I'm with you. You're owning the room. Billy, he not only owns the room he's in, he owns the room he's not in. And what do I mean by that? He invites me over his house recently, and I'm exhausted. Hard work, end of the quarter. I'm spent. Scotty,
can't let this go.
Scotty, just swing over. All right, fine. I'll pop over. I get into his kitchen. Another one of his buddy calls Billy. He goes. He leaves. He vanishes. And he asked me to show up to hang, and literally he's nowhere to be found. So Billy not only owns current rooms, he owns rooms that he's not even in. But on a serious note,
but I did follow up to make sure he was okay.
Well, that's good.
But it reminds me of some of the our younger sellers out there, right? And I see this with my son. He's 20 years old, and some of his friends know about this podcast, right? And some of them, Billy. And for those sellers out there, those future GOATs, be the one in the room that's asking. Like the one guy is Joe. Right, Joe Crowley, Mr. Atwater, what's going on with the podcast? How you and Billy doing? Hey, can I see a couple cuts before you guys go live? Because I'm really interested. I want to get this out to my frat, but own the curiosity piece, in and outside of work, And I think that's an indication if you're going to be a really good salesperson.
I agree.
That's great. Hey, so Robbie, now just talking about your peer influence. Obviously, I loved your opening story, right, with objection handling. I know you're now teaching. I think for your company, you help do some training around prospecting, objection handling, and those things. So just maybe talk about how you don't have a direct team, but you can still be a leader, and you're demonstrating that in real time with teaching others. But talk about your peer influence.
So I think I mentioned earlier on, I believe in karma. I believe in doing good for people, whether it puts money in your pocket or not. I literally am assigned this year. I've mentored 3 people this year. It is not an additional pay incentive. This is something they ask. Will you mentor?
It's actually costing you money.
Because it costs your time. Right. But you help these people develop. You give them, you pass on your knowledge. You pass on certain things. And when you see them succeed with the techniques that you've given them, you've contributed to their life. It's no different than volunteer work. You know what I mean? And for some reason, so many people are like, they want to hoard their time and space. But when you give your time, it comes back to you. And it has. And so I believe in that philosophy instead of worrying about what time I have. When I contribute to others, and not just my 3 mentors, for each, over the past year and a half, every month I would do for the newbies, objection and prospecting and objection handling. This would just help them because Sentinel doesn't have a training program. So I know that this is something that is tried and true.
And did
works.
you create this? Like you just
Absolutely.
stepped up, or were you asked to do it, or how did it come about?
I just stepped up. I took initiative, and they knew that that's my strength. They knew that I'm a brute force prospector. I can really take down new logos. Not this year, the year before, I brought down 9 new logos in 3 months of the year, in like the first 3 months. And then, so I'm like, it's not a gift is not a gift unless you share it with somebody else. Yeah. And so I'm like, I want to help these people. And so I was doing monthly trainings for these people. And then for the new sales reps, then I would create new, like at one time I had 2 different sessions going for 2 different crowds, but didn't get paid for it. Didn't get asked to do it. My manager liked that I took initiative. I offered it, and they loved when I would do it. And then people would go and tell the management team like, oh, this is great, because so many times we get vendors that come in and say, hey, we want to make this interactive. Well, in training, it's up to the trainer to make it interactive. How do you make it interactive? Exactly what you're doing. You're asking questions and you're ping-ponging off of each other. You give them the space to make it interactive. You give them the curiosity to ask the questions. You give them the WIFM. If anyone who doesn't know WIFM, what's in it for me? What's in it for you is giving you better prospecting techniques, newer styles, way to make things easier, because prospecting is the hardest part of the job. You can become good at that and you have fun with it. All of a sudden it's like, because it's you're drawing connections. Instead of I have to prospect, I have to go out and connect with people today. And it totally reframes your mind. I'm going to connect with people, and that's what's been successful for me.
And for our younger folks out there in our audience, Robbie, I'd say take prospecting as serious. Like you're prospecting to get clients to go 3x pipeline. That's how we get paid, right? But think about prospecting a little bit differently in that. How are you prospecting for your next mentor? So to your point, every high-end salesperson has some people that help them in a positive way to get them moving in the right direction. Every one of them. Billy, I'm sure you've got countless examples. I know I do, and you do too. We might look at those high performers as they're too busy because they're always crazy and they're running around, but prospect. My advice to the folks out there is prospect to get you the right coach and mentor. And it takes effort. And it might take some time. Like, how do you get their attention? Could be Ohio State, could be Xavier, could be popcorn, whatever it may be. Dogs, in your case, base. But take it seriously, right? Because that's the building block that you're going to need to get to that level. So it's not just about your W-2.
Correct.
So maybe switching gears a little bit. Development, self-development, you've demonstrated that through this conversation. You've done that throughout your career. How do you right now continue to work on your craft? And what advice would you have for somebody that's maybe newer in their selling career? What are the things that they should be doing day in and day out to get better at their craft? Do you feel like you've arrived, by the way?
No, you never arrive. You just keep the journey. Arrival is, I don't believe in arrival. The journey is ongoing and development is ongoing, and you just develop different things. You may not be put in baseball terms. You may not be throwing the 95 mile per hour fastball anymore, but you're hitting spots on the plate that you weren't hitting before. And that's where finesse comes in. So I'd say I'm more working on my finesse. One of my biggest anxieties is not as having an empty pipeline. You know what I mean? So that is also a motivator. So it's a healthy anxiety, because what if you lose your client, your number 1 client, your number 2 client? How are you going to replace them? So I like to strategize by having a thick, heavy bench at all times. Even if these players aren't main contributors, I want to have a bench. Bench mean a lineup of clients. I have about 30 active clients right now. Some are heavier than others, but sometimes some will hit stronger certain parts of the year. So I always like to continue to refill my client base as if something's going to fall off. And if it doesn't fall off, great. But if it does, I'm constantly adding those building blocks.
But what specifically are you doing to work on the skills?
Okay. So I still continue to prospect. I still continue to do trainings, provide trainings, and go to trainings as well.
So just your commitment to practice, and doing it in real time.
Absolutely. Not finding time, but making time. And then also, if you work 8 to 5, that's great, but there are times where it's going to require more than an 8 to 5 mentality. So it's finding those opportunities, finding the opportunities to, to do work that's above and beyond what is required from your salary or what you're expected to
How about
do.
books, podcasts, anything come to mind? You in any of that?
So I
know at one time you were.
Yeah.
Like back in the day. I didn't know if that's changed.
I listen to more Audible books.
Okay.
I love Power Habits. I
Yep.
think that's huge because it really teaches you how to create new habits, and habits that stay. Power Thoughts is another good one. I have to look, but Power Habits is really what I really like. Yeah.
Awesome. We noticed a lot of our guests take some time and give back, both to you as a mentor, you doing your training, and it could be outside of work too.
Yeah.
What do you do outside of work, and do you think that contributes to you being so successful at work?
Absolutely. So I volunteer 2 nights a week, as Billy mentioned. I lead a small group, so we, which also kind of helps with hospitality because we have people over once a week, and we eat dinner together.
Hit that Blackstone?
Hit that. Sometimes we do.
Why not?
Luckily, I don't have to cook every week. We have an alternation.
Okay.
But we eat dinner together, and I can't say enough about the connections that you make by sharing a meal with somebody. And and that comes from the other, my other volunteering, what I do for the church is called Alpha. And I just finished my 20th season over this last 6 years.
Congrats.
Of being the leader for Alpha. And very similar to that, it's sharing a meal together, drawing connections, coming to a place where a safe place to ask questions, doubts, whatever you have. And it's just, it's a way to create community and connections for people. So in hospitality, divine hospitality is what Alpha is all about.
I love that. And how do you find, I guess, how do you balance your time? Because obviously you're working a lot. You've got a lot of commitments outside of work, newly married. How do you find that balance, and what do you do to kind of disconnect from the world of work?
Sure. So luckily, when I do Alpha, they're 11-week sessions, and they're twice a year. So I get breaks in between. But our small group is every Tuesday night. So when I'm in Alpha season, I do have Tuesdays and Thursdays. The nice part about it is my wife does small group and Alpha with me. So
you're together.
We're doing it together. So I'm not losing that time. But on my days off, my Mondays and Wednesdays, I have to be intentional about doing the husband thing and connecting that way too. So, and we also do volunteer work at the church. We're on the prayer team. We're on the contribute team as well. So, and I know this isn't a spiritual podcast, but
it is now.
It
is for me. I'm working on Scotty.
When you do God's work,
so mean.
He tends to do yours, or allows you to do yours better. It gives you those tools and equipment. So there is a spiritual aspect for me. I can't say my success is all because I'm a power prospector, or I know how to overcome objections better than most, or I think outside the box to get in front of people, or I have curiosity. I also have faith on my side. Yeah. And that's huge. That's a confidence that I don't get just from my own skill, gift, or power.
Yeah.
It just compounds it and makes it that much better. And I've seen it each year. That's why one year I qualified for President's Club in 3 months.
Yeah. And I've got, speaking of faith, I have your mom praying for some deals for me right now. Is that weird?
No, not at all.
Billy thinks it is.
No, I think that's excellent, dude. Excellent.
Not at all.
Put it to work for work. Absolutely.
This deal that I said took me 2 years, and my gratitude journal for the past 2 years, I've manifested for this. I've thanked him in advance for, God, thank you for this deal. Thank you for this deal. You believe it, it comes true. And then when it really comes true, you're like,
I told you.
So
that's awesome.
That's great.
I think it is great. So.
Well, are we ready to go to quick hits?
Yeah, I just wanted to get, Billy, before we hit quick hits, your goat's gravy, Robbie. You've brought up a lot of really cool things in here. Can you summarize it for our listeners on what's made you so successful, or maybe some pieces of advice as you wrap up kind of your goat's gravy for our audience.
Sure. From a sales perspective, it's persistency. Persevere, persistency, just keep going, and patience. Those 3 Ps.
Okay.
And I think that's what's really helped me. Connections and networking. And those are 2 subsequents that are going to help accelerate just the skill set of what you have. And it's going to, you hear the term work smarter, not harder.
Mm-hmm.
You got to do both.
Yep.
You got to work hard to learn how to work smart. And so that's one thing
that's
that
great.
I would say.
Well said.
Love it. Yeah. So Robbie, we hit a lot of this, and we're just this is our quick hit section. So just what comes to mind, and just for our listeners, what can they chew on? You got a couple bullets, that come to your head. Number 1, negotiating. Talk to us about what that means to you and what kind of techniques, what comes to mind when you hear that word?
Negotiating means asking more questions, understanding exactly what they want. Instead of just phrasing what you want to give them, understand the underlying need. And negotiating really comes with questions. It ends in a question mark, not a period.
Yep. Love it. Love it. Self-development, we hit a little bit, but for our young, think of yourself back in 18 to 35 years old, right in that range. What are you thinking about with self-development?
I find the best performers, watch what they do exactly what they do, and do a little bit more. That's the best way I can encourage self-development, is model other people and then put your own craft and spin on it.
Yeah, dude, that's great. How about negotiating? You negotiate a lot of deals. Any tricks of the trade?
Well, negotiating, once again, is I believe it's just understanding what they really want, what they really need, and then ending with a question mark instead of a period. So,
interviewing. I'm sure you've wowed a couple people here in their base. What are you thinking about with our younger folks looking to interview?
Interviewing, be curious. Ask them questions. Don't just be wait for the interviewer to ask you questions. Spin it back on them. When they ask you a question, ask them a question. Be curious about it. You don't know what you don't know, but try to identify how you can be successful here. What tools are they going to give you? What training are they going to give you? What programs do they offer? Help see. Interviewing is about making a match, not just you getting the job, but you getting the job that is right for you.
Love it.
Well said. Love that. Social selling. I don't know how much you leverage that. I know there's kind of more of a focus on that, selling through LinkedIn, prospecting, reaching out to people. But what's your experience or advice around social selling?
I think what's great about social media is finding what people like and trying to be able to use that information to draw connections, right?
Mm-hmm.
So even if you're not selling through social media, you're drawing those connections. You're identifying if they like Ohio State. You're identifying if
Roll Tide, baby. Roll Tide.
if they like sweets,
Oh, yeah.
And it's people want to talk to you when you know something about them. They're interested in that because you draw that connection.
Yeah. Follow up.
Oh, follow-up starts, follow-up is so important. Follow-up, follow through, because if you don't have the follow-up, all the work you put in the front end is just pointless. So follow-up with follow-up is what I would always say. So
and one more thing on that, it's not just checking in, right? You got to you're really creative with how you do things. It's making those deposits ongoing. So I think that goes back to the social selling. Find things they're interested in. Maybe send an article they might be interested in if they're a leader around leadership or something in their industry. Thought you might be interested in this, just FYI. They know you're there, right?
Yep.
You're making a deposit, but it doesn't always have to be just checking in. That's the
create
worst.
that before you end one meeting. Have that next meeting set up. If they're tentative for setting that next meeting, put a placeholder for a phone call, even if that's all it is. Say, I'm going to put this on the schedule, but have something scheduled. Otherwise, you become a check-in.
Yeah.
Right?
This happened recently, but I had someone. They just put an invite on my calendar. They reached out to me. I didn't follow up. I didn't reply.
Candidate?
No, it wasn't even a candidate. It was someone, we're working on rolling out a new CRM, and someone was following up with me on it. And
Okay.
they just set up an invite. I saw it. I'm like, yeah, I do know it's important. I need to talk to them. So I just accepted it, and that's how we connected.
The blind invites.
Yeah.
And you can tell, Robbie, we're passionate about this one. Like if Billy and I are chirping on this one, because it's everything. And I agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people miss it. Especially in the interviews, and that'll be my next question for you, and just comments around interviewing is some people, we have the interview and then I get a call from someone, Scott, how did it go? And I said, I have no clue. I'm anticipating the follow-up, but it hasn't happened. If they have a great interview and there's limited to no follow-up, like Billy says with the article, or here's what I took away, or I'm looking forward to these next steps, which should all be encapsulated the same day. Like Tim Frank, nut job about same day follow-up. It's not the next day. It's not within 24 hours. It's the same day. Well, what if I interview at 5 o'clock? Do it at night. It's important. It's a subtlety. So I think that's important. But interviewing in general, what do you think? They're kind of go hand in hand. Like just interviewing, like any hot tips where you've nailed an interview?
Same thing with follow-up, write a thank you card, follow up. This is what I captured on the interview. These are the things that were important to me. This is where I feel I could contribute to the company. And this is where I feel the company can contribute to me. I would just like a follow-up. Recap what you did on that interview and ask for the next interview.
Love it.
Well, dude, this has been awesome. It's been great having you in-house. Thank you for coming to visit us. Any departing words?
Man, I just want to say for those people new in sales, it is a very lucrative position, but it's also more than lucrative. It's very fulfilling in what you do. If you love what you do it better than most. And I would encourage it. It's a great career. If you like connecting with people, if you like talking with people, if you like listening with people. So many people think that sales is all about talking. It's not about talking. It's about listening. It's about asking the right questions. And it's about creating connections with people. And so I would encourage, if those things tug at your heart, to give sales an opportunity.
Love it.
Right on. Base. Phenomenal work. Appreciate you coming in to Goats Gravy. You're the best.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of another episode of the Goats Gravy. We've shared some awesome insights and strategies aimed at enhancing your journey in sales. And the conversation does not have to stop here. So be sure to follow us on social media at the Goats Gravy and explore more at thegoatsgravy.com. Your journey towards sales mastery is ongoing, and we're here to support you at every step. So thank you for tuning in today. Stay curious, stay driven, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care.